Welcome to Plant Pod. Right now we're in the middle of our Kingdom Framework series, where we're talking about what it looks like to plant a church based on Kingdom Framework principles versus what many of us are used to, which we're calling the American Church Framework. So we're taking a few weeks to have you guys, our listeners, submit some questions to us on some of these concepts. You can go ahead and email me directly at rob@aspiretucson.com. And we'll be sorting through those questions, gathering up the ones that are similar, and answering them at the end of the series. We're planning to do about 2 more episodes. Of course, that could change depending on how the conversation goes. But while we collect questions, we actually are taking a break from the Kingdom Framework series, and today's episode is going to be part 2 of our discussion with Pastor Ashley Evans of 22nd Street Baptist Church right here in Tucson, where we ask some good questions based on the last episode on prayer about what it would look like if you planted a church totally based on prayer. So with all of that said, let's jump in. Welcome to Plant Pod. I'm Robert Romej, and this is going to be part 2. We weren't necessarily planning on it, but a part 2 of our conversation on prayer with Ashley Evans, and we've got Makenna Ayres and Brian Hook. Thank you guys all for being here again. So on the last one, if you did not listen to that episode, definitely go back because it's going to give you a lot of context for this one. But at the end of it, we started talking about prayer, even more so about what would it look like if you were to plant a church and it was totally based on prayer. And so with that, you had a quote. Can you repeat that quote from the last episode?
Yeah, it was from J.D. Greer, and it's about the early church. He says, the early church prayed for 10 days. Peter preached for 10 minutes, and they saw 3,000 people get saved. Today's church does the same thing, but we switch the zeros around. We pray for 10 minutes. We preach for 10 days. I think he's talking like a revival, and we see 3 people get saved, and we think it's a success.
Yeah.
And we just have to get back to being a church that prays like the early church that prayed.
Mm-hmm. And so you had some really good thoughts, Brian. On
as Ashley was talking, I thought about just the fact that we both have planted previous churches, and both in Phoenix area, that is, right? Or you planted one here.
Tucson was my only time.
You planted one here, and I planted one in Phoenix back in 99, 2000, and it was great. It was a great experience, but it was very different than what I would do today. And I think sometimes, as a church planter, sometimes you want to hear from people that did it right, but then also you want to hear from some stories where we would have said, I would have never done it that way before. I would change it all different, And there's some things I would have done similar, but a lot of things I would have changed. And one thing I would have done is I would have prayed more, and I would have taught our folks to pray more and how to pray. And fortunately, with Aspire, we did more of that, hearing God and all that. But I think that just thought maybe we just talk through what it would look like.
Yeah. So give us an example. Like, what kind of things would that look like or change? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm going to start with Ashley because he's our guest. So I'm gonna turn it over to him. What do you think? What would you do?
Well, I tell people when we do church planter training, if you just take everything I did and do the opposite, you'll be great. And so one of the things that we didn't do in our church plant was this emphasis on prayer. I taught people to set up and tear down, to invite people, all of the mechanical things that need to happen in church. But I didn't spend time teaching people to pray because I'll be honest with you, back then, prayer for me was, God, we need this many people to show up. God, we need this much money this week. Prayer was very different than where he's brought me and is still growing me today. But so I think one of the things I would do is just start off teaching people about prayer and just spending time with them in prayer. And there's nothing wrong with going through, hey, we're going to spend 3 months going through our values and another month going through our mission statement. And those, I get it, that's necessary, that's needed. And so maybe you do like 30 minutes to an hour of, hey, we're just going to gather together and worship together and pray together, and encounter God together. And then after that, we're going to do a little teaching about what we hope the church, looks like. For us, our mission statement is pointing people to Jesus. Well, that ought to come at the end of a time of prayer so that people's like, yeah, I want to point people to the guy I just spent some time with, to the Jesus I just hung out with. Yeah.
That's good.
I think one thing I would do as well, I would just teach them how to agree, because I think when you start out, right, when we teach this about the kingdom, and it's about disciples, and then once you have a disciple and then you lead somebody to Christ, there's two. Hopefully you've taken more than one with you, right? And so the very basic component is, let's hear from God on the next step. Like, what is he doing? Like, we get so far ahead with our plans, and most of us already have all our plans, vision statement, values, where we're planting and all that, and that's just the husband and wife, boom, this is where it is, rather than bringing people in agreement and saying, hey, what do you sense? What do you sense God's doing? Here we are in Tucson. What do you sense God's doing? And I think, I think it's fine as denominational leaders to look over a city and have kind of we do this. We put pins on maps and we say, this is where this area is and this area is. And it helps, I think it helps planters to know, here's some people that have gone on before us in agreement and prayed over our city to where this is where it is. But at the end of the day, a planter needs to, with his wife and others, to say, what do you sense? Like, where do you think we should plant? Where do you think that should be?
It almost sounds like the first step. So you're saying, if someone feels like they're going to be a church planter, the first step is to pray rather than anything
We brought
else.
12 men into our city from our small group at Hope Church, and we prayed over the city, and we did that for 2.5 days. We just prayed over the city.
So then what did God show you in a practical way when you came out with those 12 people?
It was pretty powerful, especially where the foothills was. We were leaning toward the foothills, but God showed us He showed us that the people on the south side of town, which is considered kind of the poor end of town or whatever, they were much happier. They were much more full of joy. The people in the foothills that had it all were separate, and there was a sense of living our lives in isolation, sons and daughters not knowing mom and dad not getting along, but yet you'd go into the poor end of town and there was laughter, there were parties, there were fiestas, and then, of course, I'm totally stereotyping, but at the end of the day, that's what we saw in prayer. At the end of the day, that's what we saw, and that was very evident to us that, Brian, you and your wife in Aspire, you're going to be planning in an area where people that have it all are very unhappy and very hurt and very broken, and and that did play out that way. And so we also sensed a sense of death over a city, like death. Like, we live in a city that celebrates death. Like, everywhere you go, you see skeletons.
Yeah.
Like, we celebrate it. Like, it is a huge thing every year where people gather together, and it comes from kind of a Catholic background, but at the end of the day, about 10% of them are Satanists, and they come and they pray over this city, and they pray death over this city. So we sensed that when we were here. We didn't come during that time, but we sensed that there was an aspect of death over this city that has been, but that's not what God is. God is about life. So just give you an example, by coming into the city, and even just in 2.5 days, we heard from God about the state of our city, and that came out of prayer. And
Wow.
I never did that. First church plan, I didn't, I'm from Phoenix. I went to high school there. I didn't need to pray and ask God. I did, but I didn't. I just, we put up some candles, got a good worship leader, get some college students, and we were going.
So how else? Like, you just started it. So can we keep going down the list, so to speak, of what those things are? So if you start with partners, like you had, or not partners, you had your small
People
group.
in agreement.
People in agreement, stuff like that.
Two, Matthew talks about it. In Matthew 20, in chapter 18, truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. I tell you, if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by the Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them. That's what we want from a church plant. We want God's presence.
Yeah.
And so many times we have full congregations without God's presence, rather than 2 or 3 with God's presence. Do you want 200 without Him, or do you want 2 with Him?
Right. That
You
sounds
know?
a lot like what we were talking about, maybe it was last week or a couple weeks ago. Like, not, you didn't come and you're like, all right, what can I bring to Tucson? Like, what does Tucson need that I have that I can give to Tucson? It was, God, what are you already doing
That's
here?
exactly
Like,
right.
what's your mission in here, and how can I join with you in that? Which I think is a huge, like, mindset shift. It's cool.
So what would be the next thing that you'd bring prayer into or change from what you've seen or done in the past?
I don't know that it's a change, but something that I saw prayer be impactful in is in very small things. I think it's in either Luke 9 or 10 where he talks about going out and looking for a person of peace. And when you go into a place,
Yeah.
look for that person of peace. When we were starting the Foundry, which Ben Barfield, by the way, said, if your church fails, we're going to call it the Floundry. So, yeah, thanks a lot, Ben. But when we were planting that first year was a lot of exposure events and a lot of just door-to-door, hanging flyers and things like that. And just something small like parking on a street and finding a place to park where somebody wouldn't, come yell at you or have your car towed. And I remember praying, say, Lord, help me find a person of peace. And I pulled up in front of somebody's house and they were out in the front yard and I explained to them what I was doing and I'd prayed for this. And she's like, absolutely, you can park here. You can stay here as long as you want.
Wow.
And I got to go through that whole neighborhood, just walking up, door after door,
Wow.
hanging
Yeah, that's
flyers. Didn't get to engage with them afterward. They didn't become, the biggest giver in our church and teach kids Sunday school or anything like that. But it was just a small thing of before going out to do something, praying, Lord, I need you because I'm nervous and I've never done this before and
Yeah.
I'm in unfamiliar territory and, I don't know anybody and I need to go park in someone's, I know it's a public street, but people get weird. I know because I get weird.
Yeah.
I'm the old man. Get off
Yeah.
my lawn.
I think finding that, joining God in what He's doing, that person of peace has a lot to do with that. Like finding people that have gone before you, that sometimes they're believers and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just people in our city that, they don't necessarily know Shalom pace, but they want
Right.
good in our city and to meet them and all that. But boy, it is fun when you find that person that has been praying for you and to find those people and to connect with those people. And it's not always possible to find those people, but for us it was Rose Hunter. She was praying around our community, and my wife was ready to quit. We'd been there at it for a few months, and she's like, this neighborhood they're so mean and nobody says hi to me. And Faith, my daughter, was there, and so she's like, I think we're just going to go for a walk. And so Faith and Mom went for a walk, and about 10 minutes later they came back with Rose. And Rose had been walking, and she said she heard my wife call Faith, and she goes, oh, that's a Christian name. And so they connected, started dialoguing. Turns out Rose had been praying for a church plant to come to that community for 6 years. So we were the answer. And Rose was kind of a person of peace in that area. She was.
Yeah.
So we thought we were coming to plant a church, but Rose was praying for that church. And there are numerous church planters. I've heard stories like that where they find the person that was actually praying for the church.
Yeah.
And so to your point, we're joining God in what He's doing. We're not bringing something.
Right.
We're joining Him
We're
in what
like
He's doing.
sojourners and strangers, right?
Yeah.
Like strangers in a strange land. And
But that comes through prayer, right?
right, yeah. But then you meet those people, right, that not necessarily, or sometimes they're believers, sometimes they're not, but
You realize it.
Right.
It's like, wow. And then sometimes those people come to know Christ. I've seen
Right.
principals come to know Christ, or mayors come to know Christ, or
Yeah.
leaders in the city come, and they've been wanting. They don't know necessarily what they want. They just want it better than it is. And to connect with somebody that's an ambassador of reconciliation, like we are, to
That's
meet them,
good.
it's powerful.
Yeah.
And, prayer is the avenue by which that
it's
happens.
the catalyst. Yeah. That's so good.
What you're
Yeah.
talking about reminds me a lot about what Blackaby talks about in Experiencing God, where we go into a situation thinking, here's what we're going to do for God,
Yeah.
rather than, God, what are you up to and how can I join
Right.
you?
That's right.
And that starts with prayer. That is so
Right.
good, man. That's
That's
such
right.
a great thing.
That's right.
McKenna, you in the past podcast, you've even mentioned how you have I would say you have a heart to reach people, reach the lost, and wanting.
Yeah.
You know, you've mentioned it a few times, both on the podcast and off the podcast.
Yes.
So, well, you know, what would it look like to have more prayer as far as evangelism goes? Do you have any thoughts as to either by experience or just what do you think for a church?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so it's like a running joke on the podcast that I keep praying for the Lord to bring lost people into my life, and it seems like every person that I come across in Tucson is a believer, which is just crazy, which I'm excited about. It's awesome. But but to your point, I think not just encountering, like, if someone happens to come across my path and then in that moment be like, oh Lord, like, give me what I need, like already praying in advance, like, and making that like a consistent thing, not just, oh, when I remember, let me pray that, you know, I encounter someone who needs to know the Lord, but making it a priority of my day in, Lord, if you have someone for me today, like, show them to me, or Lord, please reveal to me where you want me to go today, like where my day is free, where do you want me today with this time that I have? And so I think I've seen a lot more fruit when I'm diligent in praying for those things ahead of time, and not just kind of last minute, oh, I met this person at, you know, the coffee shop, Lord, help me to, you know, speak to them, which the Lord still uses those moments. It's not like those prayers mean any less to him. But I was talking in the luncheon today at our group when we were talking about, like, if you were in a season of like deep prayer, like what would you speak into that? And so I had mentioned that, I took an evangelism and church planning class in college, and one of our assignments was literally to evangelize to 10 people that semester. And admittedly, I went into it and was rather upset by it. It was like, how am I going to get graded on like the amount of people I evangelized to? Like, how are you going to give me a letter grade based on, you don't know my life? Like, you don't know who I'm going to encounter. It was Dr. Cochran. I'm like, Dr. Cochran, what is this? Like, what are we doing here? And then the Lord really convicted me and was like, how are you not already doing this? Like, how are you not already praying that you reach at least 10 people, you know, over the course of 16 weeks or, you know, however long a semester is? And humbled myself a little bit and was like, all right, yes, you're right. Like, I should be doing this all the time. This shouldn't be like a big ask of me, you know, to talk to 10 people about Jesus, right? Because I'm not in charge of their response. I'm not asked to convert 10 people. It's no, share the gospel with 10 people. Okay, Lord, I can do that through you. I can do that. And so I was just praying constantly every day, multiple times a day, Lord, bring me the people, show me the people that need to know you. And just had so many incredible conversations with so many different people that would not have happened any other way had I not been praying ahead of time. I mean, just like crazy stories about, you know, people I worked with that had passed away, and then meeting extended family members of theirs that didn't even know I existed. And, oh, I shared moments with so-and-so and getting to have gospel conversations with them, or meeting, I met a Muslim woman who had just had a miscarriage and she was broken and just didn't know that everything was going to be okay. And just all these incredible stories. And did they all come to know the Lord? No, but I got to have those conversations, and, you know, the seeds were planted. And so it really does make a difference if this is something that is not just a coincidental, okay, if it happens, and I'll be faithful in the moment. But no, like, Lord, bring these people into my path. Bring me to where these people are, wherever you would have me to be today, this week, this month, this year. Place me there and give me what I need to share your gospel with them. And it truly makes all the difference in the world. Wow. So although that's something I'm praying for now, it's a challenge to me, like, no, be praying for this every single day, not just weekly, you know, not just my weekly challenge, but every single day be praying to encounter those people. And they're abundant. I mean, Tucson is really like a lost city. And so it's not like they don't exist. So I need to be more diligent in asking the Lord to bring those people. So
that's really good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
That's a really good story.
You're a small group pastor. How would this change small group? Like, if you were, like, we always talk about how we want to start small groups before we do our worship service. And if you're a church plant, I surely would do that again. Had I done it again, we did it that way. I think we did it right with Aspire. We did it wrong with the previous church that I planted. God blessed. But we did it backwards. We started the worship service, then the small groups. It was always tough. Starting a small group or small groups, and how would you How
Yeah.
would you do that? What would that look like, small group pastor?
Well, when I stepped into the role of working with our church, the main focus and the reason was to oversee small groups. And I remember early on sitting around in a small group. I don't remember if it was in training or maybe it was just in a small group, something with you there. And I think you had made some sort of comment, maybe it was one-on-one, of just, man, how cool it would be if when we get together, if we focus on prayer, and what if God just takes it the whole night? Like, we meet for an hour and a half and we try to really respect people's time. What if for that whole hour and a half, you just end up praying? Like, you have an agenda of what we're going to talk about. And I remember when that idea was first put into my head, I was like, that's scary, because I don't have any control over that.
Right.
And so quite honestly, like, I'm like, what are you like, yeah, kind of like, what, like, do I just force it? There's awkward silences.
Yeah.
What do I do with that? How do I, and it was a whole lot of, how do I, a whole lot of I's in there. But I will tell you now that I've had the opportunity to just sit in some of those, and maybe even what has helped me is address some of the things that are awkward. You know what? We're going to sit here. It'll be like 30 seconds of awkward silence, just saying it up front. And people are like, all right. I now know what to expect. And you know what? It's the most unawkward thing. It's not awkward. It's like, especially when God, and it doesn't necessarily happen every week because it can't force the Holy Spirit to show up and move in people's hearts. But boy, when the Spirit moves in people's hearts on a given small group night, it is absolutely amazing. Yeah. And that might happen once in every 4, 6, 10 weeks, whatever it is. But I think everybody in the room is like, can we come back like tomorrow? Right, I'm ready for small group.
Those are the
week.
nights we stay around.
Those, yes, that's where people want to be there. Yeah.
What is it about that? Like, what is it about that versus the planned? Okay, I got my, which is fine, by the way. It's okay to plan what you have,
and you probably should.
You should.
You really should.
But what's the difference? What's the difference between the God took over and the other?
Well, it's always a humbling experience as a leader whenever I'm the one that's leading the group, because my plans get pushed aside and something better happens.
I like that.
People end up hearing something that they needed to hear that I didn't know about. Someone from across the room will speak into someone's life, not knowing how meaningful that was, or that's what they needed to hear, or that's what they were struggling with. Those are the kind of moments where I'm just in awe, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do with this, Lord, but thank you. And so it's a scary thing to start, but I will say, when you start, like, be persistent, be consistent, and do it every time. Allow for those awkward times, and allow for the Lord to speak. Don't rush it. Don't feel the need to fill every single little thing and pocket with my own words. And over the course, it may happen the first time, it may not, it may be the 10th time, like I said. But when the Lord really starts speaking through people, it's pretty amazing. And now it's not awkward. It's not as awkward to like kind of get those things going and just allow for the Spirit to speak. Because I think ultimately, what do we as Jesus followers want? We want to spend time with God. We want to hear from God. We're always praying and want to hear from the Lord. If only I could hear from God. So let's do that together and let the Spirit speak through us. So I don't really know if that necessarily answers your question, but I will say, if there was one thing that I would love for not just our small group leaders, but all small group leaders that are out there, is just spend more time praying together and hearing from God together in your small group. Like, it's absolutely amazing. Yeah.
I would really like to hear, how would your vision casting, or even receiving the vision and the values, how would it have been changed had you started with prayer? Not that, I'm not assuming you did.
I think it was birthed in prayer.
Good.
I just don't know that it was bathed in prayer.
That's good.
I think it started off really good, but shifted to, because I was coming from a larger church, like you talked about being in a bigger church, and bigger, better, badder, all that kind of mentality, and so I felt the pressure early on, to get results. And so I think that vision was birthed in prayer of starting a church that would become like a church planting church, and plant churches that plant churches that plant churches. But I don't think I stayed with that. I very quickly ran to get to sustainability, get to viability, get to just survivability. And so,
Goes back to that desperation we talked about in the previous time, like
Yeah.
staying in that desperate mode,
yeah.
which is all we have, really. You know, Jesus
Yeah.
tells us that's all we have.
Yeah, and I wasn't desperate for God. I was desperate for results. And there's a big difference. And I think if planters, guys, if you would just be desperate for God, that's all you need. And if you have, what did you say, 2 or 3 people that are solid, sold out, that's a whole lot better than 200 that are dead,
Yeah.
soaking up sponges.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
that's good.
That's so good.
How about partnerships and all that? Did you ever get a partner you didn't really want?
no, as long as they were giving, no.
But I tell you what, I did do and still don't do near enough. I don't. Those that are giving us finances, I don't ask them to pray for us near enough. I don't keep up with how can you pray for my family? How can you pray for me? Here's some answers to prayers. And partnering churches really, really desperately want that. And they're giving the money, but at the end of the day, I need their prayers more than I need their money.
Yeah,
and
that's
that's I think every planter could probably do a better job. I know I could have.
Yeah, I could have done a much better job of sending regular updates to people. And I see this, my friend Drew has a friend, Tanner, who's on the mission field, and he sends monthly emails. And here's a little story, here's a little thing that happened, here's what you can pray for. And I'll shoot him a quick email back. Man, that's so great. I am praying for blank. Just a 1 or 2 sentence. And I love that because I get to pray for this guy and what he's dealing with,
Yeah.
what he's going
That's
through.
really cool.
And so I think planters could definitely grow in that area. Some planters I could have grow in that area of sending regular things of here's what's going on. Not that here's what we need. Here's the support. Here's the finance. No, hey man, here's a great story of what happened, and if you wouldn't mind praying for so and so, or praying for. this.
I worked as an engineer for several years before being full time with our church, and I will say that metrics are not a bad thing, right? But the wrong metrics are a terrible thing, and so when we're talking about like the metrics, they can be a huge distraction. And when we're talking about church planning, and
Yeah.
you said like you were didn't bathe in it, you were starting to go for the success. So what are the metrics that is actual success? Because sometimes our metric is, well, I didn't have enough people. Well, maybe that's the wrong metric. So like, if we're talking about prayer, and if prayer would change how a church would be planted, what is the kind of metrics that we really should be looking for that would say like we are actually successful in the kingdom, not maybe in the world's view?
Now you're opening up a can of worms.
Can I recommend a book? I'll just
Bible?
point there. That, yes. Number 1. There's a really great book called Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome. It's so good. It's like a husband and wife. And they talk about exactly that, like not your attendance or, those kind of numbers, but like holiness, like growth spiritually, like those kinds of things. It's so good. 10 out of 10 recommend. So
All right, repeat it one more
Read that
time
one.
for people.
Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome.
Okay.
It's really good.
Thank you. Do you guys have any? I open up a can of worms, I guess. Should I apologize? I don't know.
I'll brag on he's not a church planter, he's a local pastor, Aaron Petrie, just went through a visioning thing, to say just went a few years back, but their vision statement for their church is transformed people, transforming culture. And I love that, and I hate that I didn't think of that. And I think that would be a metric to look at is, are people's lives in our church being transformed, and is that resulting in changing culture in the kingdom,
That's good.
infusing, penetrating, infiltrating the culture, and Jesus making a difference
Yeah. Oops.
It's okay. We're good.
in the world around us.
Yeah, that's good.
I think one thing, and I'm not saying this to wrap it up, but we are coming to a close of this podcast. I would say this: the bullseye to me of metric is, how's your prayer life?
Okay.
Full
like-
circle.
Yeah.
That's the bullseye. Like
Yeah.
when I look at a planter and his wife, the question isn't so much how can you improve your marriage or how can you have more of a balanced life. You're not going to have balanced life being a church planter couple. Throw that out. It's not going to be balanced. But you can maneuver through the ups and downs by praying together. And every planting couple that is struggling isn't praying.
Wow.
If they're praying, it'll work out. But they're not praying. And at the bullseye is, are you guys praying? And so everything comes from that couple. Your church actually will mimic that couple. And if the couple's praying, the church will be praying. The church is it doesn't mean that things are going to be perfect and everything like that. It's a church plant. But at the end of the day, the prayer. So I think the bullseye, the metric of success would be prayer. And then you can go out from that, but I think that if the out from that would be, how's the couple doing? Not so much how many people do you have. How's the discipling going? Not how many churches you're planting.
Yeah.
We focus on the wrong metrics, to your point. So we're so focused on right now, having thousands of church plants. And I'm all for having church plants. But at the end of the day, if we're making disciples and praying, we'll have enough church planters.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really helpful.
I want to
Looks like you're
change
about
my
say
answer to
something.
his.
Okay, that's right.
Like, take out the book. No, it's a
But
good
that's why I love Ashley. I love pastors have a heart for prayer because it reminds us and like you said today, you can always do better, but we can all of us can do better at praying.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you said something today. I don't know whether quoted it. It was either Bounds or Moody or somebody, but you said, "Pray until you pray."
Yeah, that was Moody, Dr. Moody Stewart.
I
We were
love
talking
that.
about how much prayer is enough, and he's like, pray until you pray.
Like
That's
it may
so
take you
good.
an hour to get through to pray, to truly pray.
That's how. So I just want to wrap it up and just say, like, personally, it's a convicting and a good thing to hear. Is even as a Jesus follower, especially as a church planner.
Absolutely.
But let me, okay, we've gone a month. How have I prayed? And it's not to check boxes, but it's just that is such a good metric of how was my quiet time with the Lord on a daily basis, and how is it with my spouse if you've got a spouse? And man, what better metric could there be than that? If there's problems and there's issues, let's take a pause and not like figure it out or fix it or figure some of the other like logistics out. How are we doing praying? I love that. That's a good way to.
I'll tell you, I woke up the other day and this song by Larnell Harris was just fresh on my mind, and it's "I Miss My Time With You." It's an old song. I miss my time with you. Our moments together. It's God speaking. The singer is singing it, but it's God saying it. I miss my time with you. And I'm like, I remember that song. Why is that on my mind? It was early in the morning, and I'd already moved on to my day. I had not had a quiet time. And what God was saying is, I'm going to use a very familiar song to remind you of something. Hey, I missed you. It was so convicting in a good way. But it wasn't judgmental. It was just God saying, where are you going? I miss my time with you. And that's every day with all of us.
Yeah.
I miss, like we think that we're doing it to get something, blessings, right? He wants to be with us.
Right.
That is so good.
The creator of the universe wants to be with us.
Yeah.
That's a pretty sobering idea,
Yeah.
That's so
And
good.
I have to say, and I just want to honor you, Pastor Ashley, that just on the last episode, you, Brian, were asking like, all right, I want to hear how your prayer life is going. And I think it's just a good reflection for all of us to ask ourselves that question, and just to hear what you do on a regular basis, on a daily basis. It's not only inspiring and but encouraging. So it's good. Like, I want to ask myself the same question: what am I doing on a daily basis? So thank you so much for being on the podcast
Thanks,
with us,
Ashley.
and thank you guys for being here. And I just look forward to the next one. So thank you.
Yeah.
Me too.